Hey there, viewers. Federal agents thought it was just a routine search until they found a hidden tunnel beneath Oprah's mansion. But it wasn't the tunnel itself that shook them. It was what was waiting inside. Witnesses say the agents turned pale. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The requisition order that wasn't. I never asked to be in charge of anything important. That's probably why I was given a desk next to the east wall where the light from the cracked ceiling bulb buzzed on and off depending on the mood of the building. My name's Harold Vexley, and for the past 9 years I've worked inside a federal asset processing center tucked between 2 condemned post offices in Chicago. It's not the kind of job you explain to people at parties, mostly because it sounds made up, and partly because there's really nothing to say. We catalog things other people forgot. That's the job. People die, cases close, evidence gets pulled, or some celebrity changes their name and suddenly the boxes have to move from shelf A to shelf F. My job is to make sure the boxes don't get lost in between. It was a Wednesday when the crate came in, midday, rain beating sideways against the windows. I only noticed it because of the weight discrepancy, one of those little things your fingers catch even if your mind's already on lunch. The manifest was blank. No shipping route, no sender address, just a red wax stamp that hadn't been used by our department in decades. Looked like a camera iris, but it was smudged. I opened it carefully. Standard procedure: wear gloves, mask, record item placement, photograph interior layout. But when I cracked it open, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Vinegar, mold, and something sharp underneath. Not decay, exactly. More like burnt plastic. Inside were old Polaroids, curled at the edges, their images warped like water-damaged newsprint. Most showed the same place, same frame, same lighting, but slightly different angles. Like someone had taken hundreds of shots, trying to capture the exact same moment. All I could make out was a dark wall, maybe slate or concrete, with a long silver strip down the middle. A mirror, maybe, but the flash had washed it out every time. There was a VHS terminal next to the stack. Portable model 1990S issue, dead. Wires frayed like rats had gotten to them. No tags, no barcode. The only thing that stood out was a yellow sticky note pressed to the top. Do not submit this to memory. I stared at that phrase for a long time. Not do not submit this to records, not hold for classification, but memory. That's not the kind of language we use. Our terminology is strict, controlled. Preservation, archival value, redundancy, clearance, but never memory. That's not federal speak. That's personal. I filed a Class B irregularity report and pinged it to my section chief. I didn't expect a reply. Nobody reads irregularity reports in real time. They sit in the buffer queue for weeks. I decided to lock the crate inside Vault C, tag 6A7, and forget about it for the rest of the day. But then, around 7:00 p.m., just when I was packing up, the printer started whirring. We don't print past hours. Our batch logs are all digital now, everything encrypted, secure, time-stamped. But this old wheezy printer that hadn't worked since Christmas started choking out a requisition form. I pulled it from the tray. It was an on-site assignment. Priority red, the heading read, tunnel mapping. Lot 32. Montecito parcel. That's California. My division handles Midwestern overflow only. There's no reason I should have been assigned anything out of state, let alone in a high clearance zone. And yet, my name was already printed on the bottom. I checked the clearance code. It didn't exist. Not that it was wrong, it just wasn't anything. 3 characters. Blank. Field. But the part that got me, the part that made me actually sit down and rub my eyes, was the signature line. Blank. Just a red wax circle like the one on the crate. And when I flipped the paper over, stapled to the back was a blueprint. Not of a house, not even a partial structure, just an underground layout, Square tunnels branching like veins, one central room marked playback chamber. I scanned it, cross-checked with every parcel registry I could access from my terminal. The property ID existed, sure enough, owned by one of the Oprah Winfrey trusts. The parcel had been sealed for retrofitting since 2011, but there was no mention of any subterranean structure. I tried to flag it, but the document was locked. I couldn't alter it, move it, even rename the file. I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked. Then something typed itself into the comments section. Preservation initiated. Playback in process. That's not a system prompt. I've worked here too long not to know every line of automated code we use. I tried to delete the requisition form from the local system. The window froze. Then the form regenerated. This time, it included travel logistics, plane ticket, hotel reservation, equipment manifest, and again, my name at the bottom. Only now it said cleared for site entry. I pushed my chair back and stood up too quickly. The printer started again. Another form spat out, this one a travel clearance document with my ID photo attached. But it wasn't the same photo I use, it was recent. Too recent. I was wearing the shirt I had on right now. My heart was hammering by then. I called IT, lying dead, called my supervisor, straight to voicemail. I even tried pinging the National Oversight Desk, but my clearance bounced. The error message said I was outside my authorized session, whatever that meant. I tried rebooting the machine. When it came back online, the desktop background was different. It wasn't my usual departmental seal. It was black, plain black, with a single phrase across the center in white, blinking text. Memory doesn't belong to you, but you've been assigned to it. I yanked the plug, hard. The room went quiet, just a drip of water from the air vent above. I waited. Nothing happened. But when I turned around to grab my coat, I saw the blueprint again, lying on the printer tray. Same one, still stapled, still showing that empty room deep beneath a grid of tunnels. Only now, in the corner, someone had scrawled in red pen, "This isn't a map, it's a schedule." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw flashbulbs going off, heard the click of a VHS tray loading. But the worst part wasn't what I saw. It was the feeling that I'd already been there, that I wasn't discovering anything. I was remembering it. Next morning, I came back early, tried to pretend it was a fluke, some prank, maybe malware, something explainable. The box was gone. Vault C had been resealed, no log of the crate ever arriving. But the requisition form was still in my inbox, still pending confirmation. With a countdown. Read. Light departs in 12 hours. Finalize preservation sequence. Underneath, in tiny gray text, was a link to a security protocol I'd never seen before. Playback Directive 9. Assigned role. Witness reinstatement. I clicked it. The screen didn't load. It just went black and showed a single frame. An old photo. Looked like it was taken in a courtroom. Oprah at the defense table. Someone else on the stand. But the face was scratched out. Except the eyes. And the eyes looked exactly like mine. The technical sweep. I'm Dale. Nobody really knows what I do. Not even my parents. The best way I can put it is this. I fly little machines over rich people's properties and make sure their foundations aren't rotting from the inside. That's what I tell myself, anyway. The official job title is Site Survey Drone Technician, but on paperwork I usually end up listed as Contractor 84, which suits me fine. I don't need attention. I need my invoices paid and my mileage reimbursed. They sent me to Montecito on a Tuesday. No context, as usual, just a booking notice and coordinates. The order was marked Thermal Landscape Calibration, and the request came from a third-party firm I'd never worked with before, Atria Preservation Logistics. Sounded made up, but the payment cleared fast. And when I saw the address on the job manifest, I paused. Everyone in California knows that estate, even people like me who live in a rented trailer up in Goleta. It's the kind of place that doesn't just have gates. It has gates before the gates. I'd passed it once on my way to a wildfire perimeter job. Looked like a fortress disguised as a vineyard. When I arrived, there were already 3 men in Navy windbreakers standing at the entry arch. They didn't speak much, just scanned my badge and waved me toward a temporary staging pad near a dried-up koi pond. The house itself sat higher on the slope, sprawling, blind-builded, too quiet for a place that big. You could smell money in the dirt. Not fresh money, historic money. The kind that never leaves fingerprints. I unpacked my flight case and ran diagnostics on my 3 survey drones. CR-3S with onboard FLIR imaging, GPS sync, and radio echo mapping. These things can scan underground cavities down to 1/10 of a meter. Normally, I'd run a standard 5-minute perimeter sweep, map the topography, flag any unusual heat signatures or subterranean inconsistencies, then bounce. Easiest $2,000 0 cents I'd make all month. First flight went fine. Drone 1 looped the western edge, found a few uneven sync patterns under the garden beds, nothing abnormal. Drone 2, however, went dark about 20 feet above a patch near what looked like a defunct greenhouse. No warning, no malfunction flag, just a clean drop from 87% battery to dead signal. When I tried to ping it, the GPS came back with a position that didn't make sense. Somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. Then, 2 seconds later, it corrected itself and reappeared directly overhead, but the feed was reversed. Not rotated, reversed. The trees leaned the wrong way. The clouds spiraled counterclockwise, and in the middle of the footage, the drone pointed downward and captured me standing beside the koi pond. Only problem? That wasn't live. I was still at the control station, but the footage showed me staring directly into the lens. I froze. Watched the clip again. Same thing. No glitching, no latency delay, just me, a full minute ago, looking straight into a drone I never saw. My hands were still. I wasn't piloting anything, but I was looking. Knowingly. Like I was waiting. I reset the feed, wiped the cache, resynced drone 2 and launched it again. Same spot. Signal drop. Same reappearance with corrupted GPS. But this time, instead of reversing the footage, the data came back in raw binary. The FLIR overlay auto-translated it into thermal visuals. And that's when I saw it. Below the greenhouse patch, maybe 20 feet down, was a rectangular formation. Not concrete, not soil. It pulsed, slowly. As if the walls themselves were exhaling. You know how heat signatures glow in yellows and reds? This thing glowed gray. The system didn't know how to interpret it. There was movement, small shifts along the sides, but no heat emission. And the entire area around it was ice cold. Not just cooler, impossibly cold, like it was swallowing temperature. I flagged the anomaly and sent it to the Atria contact through the secure link they'd given me. A few minutes later, my terminal blinked and a system message popped up in the command shell. Do not render memory. Memory renders you. That wasn't from my firmware. No drone OS uses that phrasing. I checked the drone's onboard logs manually, and sure enough, there was a new entry, time-stamped before I launched the drone. But the line read, Operator recognized, playback authorized. Operator, not pilot, and playback? That's not even a function on these models. I should have packed up right then. I should have filed a system malfunction report and walked off the job. But I didn't. I wanted to know more. I needed to. That video of me had etched something into my brain I couldn't scrub away. Like I was seeing a memory I hadn't lived yet. Or maybe already had. I retrieved Drone 2 manually, ran a full data extraction on the backup storage chip, When I plugged it into my field reader, most of the files were corrupted, but one remained untouched. It was labeled automatically, session_entry_0. The video was short, 43 seconds, no timestamp, no embedded location data. It opened with a descending shot through complete darkness. Then, slowly the lens adjusted and I saw it again. The rectangular room, underground. But this time the walls weren't pulsing, they were still. Made of black stone, mirrors lined the far wall edge to edge, ceiling to floor. And in the mirror, just for a single frame, someone appeared. It was me. I'm not just my reflection. Me, standing in the center of the room, wearing the clothes I had on now. Only I was older. Not by much, maybe a few weeks. A little more stubble, eyes red like I'd been crying. I looked straight into the lens and blinked once. Then the screen cut out. I don't remember breathing for a full minute after that. My hands had gone clammy, my mouth dry. I replayed the clip again, frame by frame. The moment I blinked, a faint line of text flickered along the bottom of the mirror, barely visible. I enhanced the contrast, looped it. It said, "Operator reinstated. Session 1 complete. Please remain still." That night, I didn't leave the estate grounds. I told the security team I needed more time to recalibrate for signal integrity, but the truth was, I couldn't leave. I didn't want to. The footage was wrong, but it was right in a way I couldn't explain. Like a half-remembered dream that made perfect sense until you said it out loud. Back at my hotel, I kept watching it. Every time I played it, I noticed something new. A twitch in my hand. A pattern on the slate wall. The way the air in the tunnel seemed to bend slightly at the edges of the frame. Like the room wasn't in motion, but the rules around it were. By midnight, I stopped watching it on screen. I started seeing it in my head. The rectangular room, the mirror, the breath I hadn't taken yet, the blink I never meant to do. In that line, memory renders you. I didn't know what it meant. I still don't. But when I went to plug the chip back in one last time before bed, the label had changed. The file was no longer called session_entry_0. Now it read, session_2, operator, Dale, welcome back. Chapter 3, The Estate Handler's Dilemma. The Estate Handler's Dilemma. The Estate Handler's Dilemma. The Estate Handler's Dilemma. I've worked this land longer than anyone else still breathing. My name's Lenora Fielding, and I came to this property when my hair was black and my back didn't ache before the rooster crowed. 23 years, almost to the day. Oprah wasn't always home, but the place was never empty. Staff came and went like wind across tall grass, but I stayed. The grounds needed someone with memory, not a gardener, not a foreman, a witness. I knew which trees had bad attitudes, which pipes lied about their leaks, and which corners of the estate never needed to be swept because the wind always did it for you. When the email came in about a structural survey, I didn't think much of it. These old estates get scanned and scanned again. Foundation checks, slope drift, even wild animal tunnels. I'd had badgers in places that'd shock most engineers, but this one was different. The message wasn't from Oprah's usual contacts. It came from some federal-sounding outfit, Atria Preservation. I assumed it was something to do with tax assessments or long-term insurance, but the coordinates they sent, well, those stopped me cold. I didn't need to punch them into a map. I knew the land like I knew my own bones. Those numbers pointed to the old greenhouse. And thought about that place in years. It burned down in 2009 during a strange late summer storm that didn't touch any other part of the property. Oprah had asked me not to rebuild it, said, let it rest. We covered the foundation with thick ferns and a layer of wildflowers the next spring. After a few years, even I forgot it was ever there. But now some government crew wanted to survey underneath it. I stared out the window for a while before heading up the hill. The morning mist clung to the grass like breath. The walk was familiar, but my steps felt rehearsed. I reached the old site and cleared away the patchy underbrush. That's when I saw the corner of something metal buried beneath a thick mat of roots. I went to the shed and grabbed a flat spade. It took me nearly an hour to free it. A door, flat, rusted, set into the earth like it had been waiting for someone to ask it a question. I'd never seen it before. That alone made my heart clench. I know this estate. I know it. There aren't supposed to be any doors under this hill. The hinges were sealed shut with wax, not just dripped on. It had been poured in purposefully, like someone didn't want it ever opened again. Fused over the seam, the wax had long since darkened to the color of dried blood. Etched into the iron above the seam were two sets of initials, OWI and DP. I knew the first, of course, Oprah Winfrey. But the second? I'd never heard her mention anyone with those initials, not in that tone. And just below the latch, someone had carved into the wood handle, deep and jagged like it was done in a rush or panic. Only reflections passed through. I stepped back. The wind had gone completely still. Not a bird in the sky, not a single branch daring to move. I touched the handle, cold, far too cold for the warmth of the day. I didn't try to open it. I couldn't. Something in me said it wasn't for my hands, not anymore. That night, I lay in bed trying to convince myself it was some forgotten part of the estate, maybe a root cellar from before the renovations, maybe a utility tunnel that had been walled off when the greenhouse went up. But I knew better. I knew because my dreams turned on me. I dreamt I was walking down wooden stairs, steep and narrow, the kind you feel in your knees. The walls were stone, and my footsteps echoed too long, like I was inside a throat. I couldn't see the top or bottom, just stairs stretching forever. The only light came from a single bulb swinging far above me, casting flickers of shadow that stretched and collapsed with every step. I heard nothing but my own breath and something fainter, like a reel-to-reel spinning in the dark. That soft, magnetic shook. But I wasn't alone. I couldn't see anyone, but I felt it. The sensation you get when you're being recorded, even when there's no lens in sight. My shoulders itched, like I was being drawn, not watched, but drawn, line by line, into something permanent. I never saw cameras, I remember whispering in the dream, but I felt them. And then a voice so soft it could have been my own thoughts. You were the final witness. Playback cannot begin without you. I woke before my alarm, drenched in sweat. The room smelled like wet stone. I swung my legs out of bed and felt the grit under my feet. Mud, clay-rich, cold. My boots were by the door, and they were caked in soil. I don't sleepwalk. I never have. But those boots, they'd been somewhere deep and damp. I rushed up to the hill again before the sun had fully crested. The air felt electric, like the moments before a thunderclap. When I reached the site, the overgrowth was disturbed. The door was uncovered. The wax was gone, and the latch had been turned. It hung slightly open, not wide, just enough to suggest it had been pulled, peeked through, then released. The stone beneath it was visible, slate, black and cold, with condensation weeping up from its cracks. When I leaned down, I swear to you, I heard my name echo up from the dark. Lenora. Not a whisper, not quite a breath. A memory shaped into sound. I didn't open the door further. I didn't step inside, but I didn't seal it either. I came back to the house and sat on the back porch, hands shaking. The estate had always had its secrets. Oprah liked it that way, but this This was something else. Not a secret, a ritual. And the worst part, the part that keeps me staring at the wall now, hours later, is that none of this feels new. It feels like something I forgot to remember. That cellar, those initials, the mirror warning etched into the wood, they're pieces of something I once helped bury, not to hide, but to preserve. For who, though? The feds are coming tomorrow. They'll open that door. Maybe they already know what's under there. Maybe I was never meant to remember it until now, but something tells me they won't find what they're looking for. They'll find what's looking for them. Chapter 4. Tunnel Day. They called me in under a false name, but I recognized the real operation the moment I saw the second van roll in behind ours. Foundation retrofitting doesn't involve 3 different federal departments converging on a single estate with dual-layer RF jammers, seismic ground-penetrating sensors, and an AV historian flown in from Quantico. No, this wasn't a retrofit. This was a recovery. I'm Cole, Federal Structural Response Division. I've led ops under landslides in Oregon, post-quake caverns in New Mexico, even some cold case mine reconstructions in upstate New York. But this one felt wrong from the second my boots hit the soil. The land was too still, not just quiet, waiting. Our mission brief was paper thin. 3 pages, redacted like a bad joke. The only legible instruction was a geographic marker, Lot 32, Montecito, and a vague directive, preservation mapping, Tier 3 protocol. The team came in staggered, unmarked. We had Anna and D'Angelo on seismic diagnostics, Miller from archival logistics, a historian named Dr. Fletch, who didn't speak unless spoken to, and 2 handlers I didn't recognize at all, both dressed in plain clothes and carrying sidearms they never acknowledged. We were told to call them coordinators. That's always a bad sign. The entrance had already been exposed when we arrived. Looked like a cellar door built to be forgotten. Rusted, half swallowed by the hillside. But it had been disturbed recently. The hinges were clean. The air leaking from it had that cold, mineral smell of untouched places. You know it when you smell it. The kind of air that's never tasted sunlight. We descended in stages. Portable LED rigs trailing down the stone steps into darkness that kept leaning forward. The stairs were narrow, steep, and old, older than the greenhouse record suggested. Some of the supports were oak, untreated, and not a single one had rotted. They'd been preserved perfectly. Or maybe never used. About 15 meters down, the staircase opened into a corridor that shouldn't have existed. On paper, we'd been told to expect a flattened root cellar or perhaps a storm bunker, but this wasn't a bunker. It was design. The tunnel stretched in both directions, symmetrical and long, with every inch of wall paneled in alternating slabs of black slate and mirrored glass. The ceiling was domed, reinforced with obsidian ribs that glinted slightly even without direct light. But when we turned on our flashlights, the reflections failed. That's the part I still can't explain. The light didn't bounce, the mirrors absorbed it. Ate it, you could see yourself, sure, but delayed, dim, inverted, like a heat-damaged film reel playing too slow. We tried waving our hands. The reflections came a second later, warped slightly, like they were remembering instead of mimicking. Angelo muttered first, something about feeling like we were standing in playback. I ignored him. We had readings to take. Ground-penetrating radar showed a wide chamber beneath the main corridor, maybe 15 feet below, but the data kept corrupting. Anna tried recalibrating the EM scanner, and it bricked instantly. Just powered down and refused to start again. No sparks, no smoke. It was like something inside the tunnel decided it didn't want to be seen. That's when we noticed the walls weren't just smooth, they were etched. At first I thought it was some kind of aging pattern, but as I got closer, the text came into focus. Thousands of lines carved in fine, sharp serif, almost like a courtroom transcript. No names, just lines. Some were familiar phrases, others not. Playback begins where silence ends. He rehearsed you before you arrived. You were filmed before you existed. I turned to ask Dr. Fletch if he recognized the phrasing, but he was gone. He'd stepped ahead, further down the corridor. When I caught up to him, he was standing frozen in front of one mirror, unmoving. Lips parted slightly like he'd forgotten how to close them. The reflection in front of him wasn't ours. It was a courtroom. Mid-trial, federal, you could tell by the seal. But it wasn't just a feed. It was a perspective from the witness stand. And sitting in the chair on screen, behind the glass, was Fletch, wearing the same clothes, holding a folder in his lap, silent. His mouth opened and closed in the footage, but we heard nothing. And then, as we watched, the Fletch on screen looked directly at us. His lips moved again. Just one phrase. I could almost read it. "Do you remember me yet?" I grabbed his shoulder and pulled him away. He staggered, dazed, said he didn't remember stepping ahead, said he thought he was in a museum. The others were quiet now, uneasy. The air in the tunnel had shifted. It felt thick, dense with silence. Not the silence of absence, but the kind that holds its breath before a performance. Anna called over comms. Her equipment had started cycling through timestamps from previous surveys, ones we'd never done. The system was generating backdated records of us, different positions, different errors, thermal snapshots that didn't match our movements. It was like we'd already been there. "Check the movement logs," she whispered. "They're looping. I'm following my own trail, but I'm not there." We regrouped. Miller had started mumbling something about being watched. Said he saw his own shadow go left when he turned right. I ordered a full retreat to surface, but by then, the coordinators were blocking the stairs. One held up a handheld unit I hadn't seen before. It looked like a biometric reader, but when he pointed it at the walls, the glass rippled, like heat above asphalt. And then, text began to crawl across the mirror's surface in real time. "Welcome, Federal Cycle 9. Playback initialized. Witnesses confirmed." We kept moving forward. The corridor narrowed slightly and curved. And then, without warning, the tunnel ended. But not with a wall. With a door. It wasn't steel, it wasn't wood. It was tape. VHS cassettes. Stacked edge to edge, melted together into a single slab. Hundreds of them. Their labels scorched, ink run and warped by heat. Some still bore faint handwriting. Session 1, The Mirror Room. Winfrey Playback B. Untitled audience queue. The door had no handle, no hinges, just a single phrase etched into the melted plastic at eye level. "Do not knock. You've already entered." Behind me, the lights flickered. Not the LEDs we brought. The mirrors. They began glowing. Each panel now reflected a different version of us, moving ahead, falling behind, watching us watch ourselves. And in one of them, just one, I saw Oprah. Not as she is now. As she was in an old interview chair, lit from behind, staring forward. Her mouth opened slowly, and though there was no sound, I swear she said, "Playback never ends. It waits." And the VHS door began to hum. Chapter 5. The Playback Door. They didn't brief me. They just handed me a manila folder and a headset and told me to be on the tarmac by 6. No badge, no agency stamp, just a symbol on the folder that looked like a reel of film with an eye inside it. I've worked in AV restoration for almost 15 years, and I've never seen that insignia on a single federal form. That should have been the first red flag. My name's Marisol Rivera. I specialize in analog media decay, magnetic drift, and forensic playback reconstruction. Basically, when a cassette or tape degrades, mold, oxidation, snapped reel, I'm one of the few people left who can pull usable footage from it. I've worked on cold cases, sealed testimony reels, even old televised trials that needed reframing for internal review. But this wasn't archival work, this was something else. And it started with a door made of tapes. They flew me into Santa Barbara in silence. SUV waiting at the gate. 3 men, none of them speaking more than a sentence the whole ride. When we reached the estate, I was told to leave all electronics behind. No phone, no laptop, just my reader unit and hand tools. Even that got inspected. The air was thick with something unspoken. You could feel the history pressing down on everything, like it wanted to bury itself again. The tunnel was colder than I expected, not in degrees, just in presence, like every foot downward was a subtraction. By the time I reached the VHS wall, my skin was prickling like I'd walked into someone else's dream. The door, if you could call it that, was taller than me, a grotesque sculpture of melted plastic, rusted tape reels, and fused cases. Hundreds of VHS cassettes molded into a solid slab, each one pressed into the next with disturbing symmetry. No machine could have built this. I started cataloging labels. Most were faded or smeared, but a few were clear, written in a hand I recognized instantly. Oprah's. Season. We take. Inheritance. It felt performative, like someone wanted us to know these weren't just labels, they were themes, roles, warnings. Then I noticed one tape near the bottom, slightly dislodged, not enough to fall, just enough to be pulled. My fingers hovered for a moment. Touching it felt wrong, like picking a scab you didn't earn. But it was my job. Ease it out slowly. The case was warped, partially melted along the spine. The label had one word etched into the plastic, not written. I slid the tape into my portable reader. The hum of the unit kicked in. No static, no error messages, just a clean read. That alone was impossible. The footage began with static, then shapes. A slow pan of the tunnel itself filmed from inside. The mirrors were clearer in the tape than in real life, sharp, almost sterile. The camera hovered low, as if held by someone crouched. Then it began to move, forward, down the corridor, passing each mirrored panel in steady rhythm. The reflections in the footage weren't right. They were delayed, just like we'd seen in person. But then, the camera began to rotate. And I felt my breath catch. I was on the screen, not just someone who looked like me. Standing behind the camera, watching the footage, watching myself. I stumbled back, pulling the reader away from my chest, like the proximity was burning, but the feed continued. And then, a voice, calm, gentle, familiar. Oprah. Not in her show cadence, not her broadcast voice. This was softer, slower, like someone whispering into your memory from behind a locked door. Memory is not kept, it's assigned. You've been playing this since before you knew. The image zoomed in slightly, framing me watching the screen within the screen, infinite, repeating. You did not arrive, you were selected. Playback isn't linear, it's permission. I closed the reader. My hands were shaking. I flipped open my field case, looking for a cleaning cloth, something to do with my hands. And that's when I saw it. Inside the lid, where the foam usually rests snug against my tools, something had been carved, scratched in with the tip of a scalpel, maybe. It was my handwriting, the transcript. Word for word the lines I had just heard spoken on the video, but I hadn't written them. Memory is not kept, it's assigned. You've been playing this since before you knew. I closed the case slowly, like shutting a casket. Around me, the tunnel was silent, but the air had shifted, heavier, breathing in a rhythm that didn't match my own. I turned to speak, to alert the others, to say something that might tether me back to logic, but they weren't listening. Anna, D'Angelo, Miller, they were all gathered around separate screens, portable units, handheld readers, even a wall-mount monitor someone had wheeled in while I worked. Each person was locked in, staring, and then I heard it. A sound I didn't recognize at first. Soft, rhythmic, crying. Each of them was crying, silently, eyes wide, tears falling without expression, not weeping, processing, like grief caught in buffering. And they were all repeating the same word. Again, again, again. Each one of them watching themselves just like I had. Not past footage, not security reels. Not real-time performance, looping out of order. Anna's screen showed her entering the tunnel 5 minutes from now. D'Angelo's screen showed him reading a note he hadn't found yet. Miller's showed his own face, but older, scarred, mouth sewn shut. And over the speakers, Oprah's voice continued, not instructing, not warning, narrating. They don't remember filming this, but they will remember watching it. You are not experiencing playback. You are playback. I stepped back toward the door, toward the fused tapes. The temperature had dropped. My breath was visible. And then, faintly, so faintly I wasn't sure if it was memory or sound, I heard my own voice play back from the tape unit. I didn't write this. I didn't film this. Why do I remember it? And Oprah responded, "It's because you said it, and once said it cannot be unsaid." I reached to eject the tape from the reader, but it had already rewritten its label. Now it read, Marisol, Session 3, Witness Reinstated, Chapter 6, The Archivist Who Knew Too Little. My job was never supposed to involve mirrors, let alone playback. I file boxes, I catalog, I cross-reception. I am, as they say, invisible. My name's Rowena Bell. Been working in the federal court's evidence repository in D.C. for 12 years, lower level. Not underground in the metaphorical sense, literally underground. The building above us is public-facing, bustling, all marble columns and yellow badges and freshly printed subpoenas. But where I work, it's quiet, cold, the kind of silence that only grows around forgotten things. We handle everything that doesn't fit anywhere else. Sealed celebrity cases, rejected evidence, misclassified transcripts. I don't make the decisions, I make the labels. White sticker, black text, date, box number. That's all I need, that's all I'm paid for. Until the shipment came in. There were no warnings, no requisition slips, just 6 boxes wheeled in on a cart by 2 men in unmarked coveralls who didn't say a word. They signed nothing, left no ID, just nodded, left the cart, and walked out through the freight elevator like they'd done it 100 times before. The first thing I noticed were the seals. Thick red wax, stamped not with a federal crest or chain of custody code, but with a symbol I didn't recognize. A circle with a triangular aperture in the center, like an old camera iris. It looked like it had been pressed in with heat. The wax smelled faintly of burnt plastic and something else. Something like soil. Each box bore the same handwritten label, the no playback session. The box on top said Session 1. I shouldn't have opened it. My job is to log, scan, and shelve, nothing more. But the wax was already cracked. Whoever dropped it off wanted it opened. Inside were several items packed with unusual care. Velvet-lined padding, acid-free sleeves, not your typical evidence bag. On top lay a sketchbook, yellowed, soft-spined, pages curled like they'd been touched too many times. I lifted the first page. It was a courtroom sketch, that much was clear. The shape of the benches, the lighting grid above, the faint outline of a seal behind the judge's podium. But none of the figures had faces. The attorneys were blank silhouettes. The gallery was smudged charcoal. Even the witness stand was empty. Only the judge had a face. My face. I dropped the sketchbook. For a few seconds, I stood completely still, waiting for my brain to catch up. Maybe someone had drawn me recently, maybe as a joke, but the hair, the tilt of the chin, the tiny scar on my upper lip, that was me. Not just a likeness. Me. I checked the inside cover of the sketchbook. No signature, no date, just a penciled phrase along the top margin. Playback doesn't require consent, just proximity. I forced myself to keep cataloging. Beneath the sketchbook was a VHS tape, encased in a worn plastic clamshell. No branding, no security barcode, just another handwritten label, Witness Prep, Red Line A. My department still keeps a few portable VCR units for legacy playback. I plugged it in, half expecting static or blank footage. But it played immediately. The image was dark at first. Just a shadowed figure at the edge of the frame, a room with no identifiable features, a faint breathing sound. Then came the voice. Oprah. Not from a TV show, not from a podcast, but close, too close, like she was sitting behind the monitor whispering over my shoulder. You were the verdict before the trial. The witness is not called, she is remembered. And now that you've seen yourself, the record can begin. There was no video feed, just darkness and voice, but the longer it played, the more the reflection on the monitor seemed to change. At first I saw my own eyes, then my desk, then the very tape I was watching. Then the monitor blinked, and I was looking at the sketch again. The one with my face. I turned on the desk light, suddenly needing brightness, but when the bulb flicked on, the sketchbook had changed. The second page was different now. It showed a woman sitting at a desk, opening a box. My desk, my box. I flipped again. Next page. Me, standing, reading a file. I hadn't done that yet. The overhead lights flickered. I looked at the wall clock. The second hand wasn't moving. It was stuck, jittering against the edge of the 12 like it wanted to reset but couldn't. And then I noticed my terminal. It was typing. Not me, the terminal. Letters appearing slow and steady in a blank message field. You are now watching your own preservation. Playback assigned. Please remain seated. I stood up immediately. The screen refreshed. Seat detection failed. Playback delay initiated. My heart was racing. I don't scare easy. This building is full of the past. Ghosts of cases. Names you're not allowed to speak out loud. But this was personal. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk, looking for my ID badge, anything to ground me. Instead, I found a folded piece of yellow paper. Not typed, not printed, handwritten. Thank you for agreeing to preserve this memory. It must be shelved before it is forgotten. This version of you has done her part. Oh, signature. I tore open the other boxes. Sketchbooks. Oops. One after another, each with new courtroom drawings, each one with some version of me tucked into the background. Sometimes a stenographer, sometimes a juror, sometimes just a face in the gallery, but always watching, always present. I don't know how many of these images exist. I don't know when they were drawn, but they all show one thing in common. A courtroom with no trial, a performance with no outcome, just playback. I tried leaving. My badge didn't register at the exit terminal. I tried shutting down my station. It rebooted automatically. And when I looked up, the monitor had changed again. Now it showed live footage of me from behind. No camera in sight, but the angle was exact. My posture, my breathing, the way I kept turning to look at the door, it was all there, 3 seconds behind. A playback loop, not surveillance. And on the screen, in faint type overlaid across the bottom, a final message appeared. She knew too little, but she remembered enough. Session 4, playback continues. The mirror processional. I told myself I was just going back to check the readings. That's what the memo said. Minor motion anomaly, possible animal intrusion, solo recon authorized. They even stamped it routine. But we don't send solo recons for raccoons, not with this much legacy weight tied to the file. It had been 3 weeks since the tunnel was declared inert. That was the word they used, inert. Like it was a battery someone had pulled the power from. Like the air inside hadn't breathed of something watching. Like the mirrors hadn't delayed our reflections until they'd memorized the shape of us. I was the last one to see it before the seal. They kept the footage scrubbed after that. The whole place frozen under bureaucratic tape, red-stamped folders that no one really read. But then, 2 days ago, the internal motion trackers pinged. Just one, then another, heat signature, then voice print drift. The entry log read, the activation event initiated. Render cycle 9 pending. My name was listed beneath. Clearance reauthorized. A new file marked witness reinstatement had already been generated under my employee ID. No request form, no authorization code. It just appeared. Intensely, and I went. Because some part of me never left. I stepped into the tunnel at 600. Alone. Same narrow descent, same stone underfoot, but it was wrong now. The air didn't push back like before. It welcomed, like a room waiting for a performer to re-enter. The corridor was changed. The mirrors were clean now, not just reflective, clear, transparent in the way a memory becomes sharper after the forgetting. The dim, smeared half-images were gone. In their place were windows, but not into the tunnel, into other places. The first showed a courtroom, not ours, somewhere old. Wood paneling, natural light, a judge in robes from a century past. The gallery was empty save one figure sitting still in the back row. I couldn't make out their face, but they turned toward me, tilted their head, blinked once. The next mirror showed a dressing room. Oprah in her prime, studio lighting overhead. She was alone, facing a vanity, applying lipstick. But in the corner, the edge of the mirror reflected something else. A man in uniform. Federal. My uniform. I moved on. The third mirror played footage like a skipping disc. Courtroom, dressing room, audience shot. Over and over, but each flicker caught something new. My name on a document. My reflection in a lens. A camera light blinking red behind Oprah's chair. And then the whispering began. Soft, just beneath the level of thought. One word at a time, spoken in a voice I didn't recognize, but knew. Each mirror I passed whispered a word. My words, my past. Heights, Sunday, trial. They weren't connected. But they were mine. Childhood things. My fear of climbing stairs. The cage my grandmother kept birds in. A Sunday I never wanted to remember. Each mirror took one, offered it back, then passed me forward. The corridor looped once. I thought I had returned to the beginning. Same wall, same crack, but the mirrors were different again. Now they showed nothing but the back of my head, walking forward. Very panel, a slightly delayed version of me, 1,000 selves all marching ahead, unaware of what was behind them. I turned. Nothing there. I turned again. The mirror still showed me turning. I picked up my pace. The corridor narrowed. The mirrors changed orientation. Now they reflected someone else's life, not mine. An old man giving testimony, a woman clapping in an empty audience, a child rehearsing a sentence again and again. I don't remember. I don't remember. Then came the flickering. The overhead lights stuttered and the ground tilted slightly left. My boots dragged against slate that no longer felt solid, like I was walking through a memory of a hallway instead of the hallway itself. My comms unit crackled, but there was no voice, just the sound of rewinding tape. Quick, violent, choking. At the end of the tunnel stood a mirror larger than the rest, arched, floor to ceiling, and in front of it, a chair. Old, wooden, bolted to the floor. And sitting on the seat were three things: my federal ID, my sealed notebook, and a typed transcript labeled Witness Cycle Playback 9. The transcript was printed on aged paper, corners curling slightly. I flipped through it. Page 1, me entering the tunnel. Every movement described exactly. Page 2, dialogue, things I hadn't said yet, but would. Page 3, the chair, my approach to it. Page 4, the final line. I remember now. I was always part of the show. I looked up. The mirror in front of me didn't show me. It showed the chair, empty, then me walking toward it. And me sitting. The reflection moved faster than I did. It led me, and the air around me filled with applause. Not loud, not thunderous. Light, control, studio clapping, off cue, like a cue card was being raised somewhere I couldn't see. I stepped forward, and my reflection nodded. And somewhere behind the mirror, the soft whispering returned. Render complete. Memory accepted. Please remain still. You were filed, not forgotten. They gave me the assignment on my second week. No ceremony, no extra clearance. Just a padded envelope placed on my desk before lunch with a note attached, in handwriting I didn't recognize. Final case, Vault 9, non-educated recoveries. It was the new one. Still learning the layout, still trying to figure out the difference between blue-stamped evidence and red-stamped memory files. But I'd already been assigned to the deep end, the sub-basements, Vault Wing 9. They called it the playback wing, but nobody ever told me why. Some said it was a joke left over from the Cold War, something to do with old psychological conditioning trials and classified trial recordings. Others just called it what it felt like, a place for things too sensitive to forget, but too dangerous to officially remember. I signed the chain of custody log and rode the slow elevator 5 floors down. The hallway smelled like ozone and paper rot, lined with thick fireproof doors. My workstation was small. Just a desk, a terminal, a portable reader, and a steel cart labeled Intake Memory Only. I wasn't supposed to read the cases, just log, verify, and pass along to a higher handler for disposition. But this package? This one was different. The envelope had no sender, just a wax stamp over the flap, red, deep, thick, melted and pressed with a symbol that looked like the aperture of a shutter mid-blink. When I opened it, static spilled out. Not noise, but a kind of pressure. The feeling you get when you've walked into a room that remembers something awful. Inside were 3 items. The first, a shard of mirror no bigger than my palm. Its edges were wrapped in cloth like someone had once tried to protect it. The surface was cloudy but intact enough to catch a reflection. I set it aside carefully. The second, a courtroom sketch, old but sharp, inked with a precision I rarely saw in evidence files. It showed Oprah, no doubt about it, seated behind a long desk, but she wasn't facing the judge, she wasn't facing the attorneys, she was watching the audience. Every person in the gallery was blurred, faceless, except one. A small figure in the farthest back row, head bowed, filing something. Me, or someone who looked exactly like me. The hair, the badge chain, the posture, it was exact. I looked down at my own badge, half expecting it to be missing. It wasn't, but my fingers were trembling. The third item, a USB drive, plain black, no label, except for a tag stuck to it with yellowed tape. It read, "The witness rehearsal, you." I plugged it into the terminal. I didn't have to launch anything. The drive mounted itself, selected its own executable, and full-screened the playback window without a single command from me. Footage began immediately. The camera angle was odd, high, angled downward like security footage, but too intimate. It showed me, from behind, sitting at my current desk, opening the envelope I was holding right now. I stared, frozen, watched myself slide out the mirror, read the label, watch myself pause. Then the footage glitched. Static. Horizontal flicker. When the image returned, the screen was pitch black, just audio now. A voice. Her voice. Oop. But not like a broadcast, not projected. Spoken. Soft. Inside the room. Inside me. You were always here. You filed this because you saw it. Now you remember it because you filed it. Playback begins with you. The screen blinked, then closed. My terminal returned to the login screen. I hadn't touched anything. I looked down at the mirror shard, now resting on the desk. The cloudy surface had cleared slightly. I leaned in. My reflection was smiling. I wasn't. I reached for the sketch again. This time the figure in the back row was standing, holding something in their hands. In a mirror. The terminal chimed again. A new file had appeared in the system's queue. Unmarked. Auto-titled. Cycle 10. Preservation candidate assigned. The description read, "Final witness verified. Memory stabilized. Playback now active." I checked the system logs. It wasn't the first time that file had appeared. It had appeared 7 times before, each with a different intake clerk's ID. All sealed, all archived as Session 1. But mine was different. It wasn't labeled as Session 1. It was labeled, "Rehearsal complete. Record begins." I looked again at the reflection. This time, it blinked. I tried standing. The chair creaked, but my legs didn't move. My breath caught. I blinked again. So did the reflection. But I was certain this wasn't the first time I'd done this. The desk, the box, the mirror, the sketch. It had all happened before. But differently. Out of order. Like a rehearsal. And now, the record. The terminal lit up one last time. A message filled the screen in soft gray letters. You were filed, not forgotten. You are not the archivist, you are the archive. Playback has begun. And below that, my name appeared. Then a cursor. Then another line, typing itself out in real time. Say it, and it will be true again. Say it. I remember now, I was always part of the show. And I whispered it. Not because I wanted to. Because the memory was already mine.